When you walk into a typical residential property showing, you're immediately stepping into a highly engineered environment.
Oh, absolutely. It's completely staged.
Right. The ambient temperature is perfectly dialed in. The lighting is optimized to make the spaces feel, expansive.
Maybe there's a candle burning or some soft music.
Exactly. And there's usually this comprehensive little dossier sitting right on the kitchen island, detailing the exact lifespan of the roof, the HVAC system, and a list of all these premium upgrades.
It's an exercise in risk mitigation through presentation, really.
Yeah, because the entire process is designed to neutralize any friction between you and what is essentially a multi-million-dollar transaction.
The traditional seller wants you to feel a profound sense of security because, well, security translates directly to a higher purchase price and a cleaner offer.
Right.
You're buying a known quantity, or at least the polished illusion of one.
But, and this is the core of what we're looking at today, the moment you transition into the distressed real estate market and encounter a listing tagged with power of sale, that entire architecture of comfort just totally evaporates.
Completely vanishes.
The utilities might literally be severed.
You're doing the walkthrough with your iPhone flashlight.
Exactly. The property might be physically degraded or legally encumbered, and that dossier on the kitchen island, it doesn't exist.
No, because the entity selling the property has absolutely no intimate knowledge of its history.
Right, so we are looking at a transactional landscape that operates entirely in the dark.
And that fundamentally alters the risk profile of the acquisition for you. In a standard resale, you have representations, you have warranties.
You have someone to sue if they lied.
Precisely. But in a power of sale, you have an institutional seller legally mandated to shed liability, leaving you to assume the entirety of the physical and administrative risk.
Which brings us to our focus. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are dismantling the mechanics of power of sale real estate transactions.
It's a critical topic.
It really is. We are bypassing the superficial advice, the kind of stuff you see on daytime TV, and digging into the stark operational realities of how these deals are actually structured, negotiated, and closed.
Because the source material we are pulling from today is really an insider's playbook.
Yeah, the mission here is to equip you, whether you're an active investor, an agent trying to protect a client, or, simply a buyer looking for leverage in a tight market with a forensic understanding of these mechanics.
We want to map out the hidden legal traps in distressed sales.
Exactly. We want to ensure you never step into one of these negotiations without a clear blueprint of the adversary across the table.
Which is so crucial because a significant portion of the market navigates this space with just severe blind spots.
Oh, massive blind spots. Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you look at the broad market behavior surrounding power of sale listings, you immediately notice a massive psychological bifurcation.
Yes, the two extremes.
Right. Buyers, and even their agents, typically default to one of two extreme reactions. They either look at a distressed listing and immediately assume it's a distressed asset.
Meaning they see dollar signs.
Exactly. They expect a massive discount simply because of the legal status of the sale. Or, on the flip side, they view that power of sale tag as an insurmountable legal quagmire, and they just refuse to even underwrite the property.
And that behavioral split is perhaps the single biggest driver of inefficiency in the distressed market.
I mean, treating it like a normal resale stems from a dangerous assumption that all real estate transactions follow the same rules, right?
What's fascinating here is how these two errors actually manifest. The first error, treating the acquisition like a standard resale, usually shows up in the paperwork.
How so?
Well, OEO will draft a standard agreement of purchase and sale, insert customary inspection or financing contingencies, and just assume the institutional seller will engage in standard bilateral negotiations.
Like asking for closing credits for a broken window.
Exactly. They expect the bank to negotiate repairs.
Which is, it's like going to a police auction to buy a seized vehicle and getting upset when they refuse to provide you with a Carfax.
Or asking them to fix a dent in the bumper before you drive it off the lot.
Right. You are operating under a completely false assumption of the seller's obligations. You assume there's a baseline of trust and disclosure that simply does not exist in this legal framework.
Precisely. And the secondary error is the complete paralysis. You have these well-capitalized buyers who entirely redline power of sale properties from their search criteria.
Just totally filter them out on the MLS.
Yeah, because they conflate the legal mechanism of the sale with the physical viability of the asset. They assume the title is irrevocably clouded.
Or that the liability is just unquantifiable.
Right. Neither of those assumptions holds up under proper due diligence. The text explicitly states that a power of sale can be a phenomenal purchase.
It's not automatically riskier.
Not if you understand the mechanics.
If we look at how this warps the market dynamics for you as an active buyer, it creates an incredibly lucrative vacuum.
It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, because if half of your competition is submitting fundamentally flawed, standard form offers that the bank's legal department will immediately toss in the trash,
Which they will.
and the other half is self-selecting out of the bidding war entirely out of fear, the middle ground is just wide open.
That's the inefficiency right there. You can exploit that by redefining your approach to underwriting.
Right, so you just need a different checklist. It's not inherently more dangerous, it just requires a transfer of the investigative burden.
Exactly. In a standard sale, you rely on the seller's disclosures. In a distressed sale, you rely entirely on your own forensic due diligence.
The risk isn't greater, it's just unmapped by the seller.
Knowledge is the only bridge between that reckless optimism and paralyzed fear.
Okay, so to map that risk effectively, you have to fundamentally reconstruct your profile of the seller. We need to unmask who is actually on the other side of the table.
Yes, the lender.
Because in a traditional transaction, the seller is a homeowner. They have historical data. They know the grading on the east side of the property leads to pooling water during the spring thaw,
So they know the basement leaks.
Right. They know the HVAC system was serviced last month. But in a power of sale, the occupant is entirely removed from the transaction sequence.
The entity holding the title and executing the sale is the mortgagee, the lender.
So we're talking about a bank.
A schedule, a bank, a credit union, or maybe a private mortgage investment corporation. They are exercising their legal remedy to recover a defaulted debt.
And the relationship to the physical asset is entirely abstract.
It is literally a line item on a spreadsheet.
So they have zero visibility on the physical reality of the asset.
Yeah.
They don't know if the roof leaks. They don't know if the local municipality issued permits for those structural changes to the main floor.
They don't even know if there's an active hostile tenant occupying the secondary suite.
Right, some guy who is engaged in a protracted battle with the landlord and tenant board. The bank is totally blind to that.
They possess zero historical or operational data, but more importantly, their strategic objective is radically different from a traditional homeowner.
Okay, how so?
Well, a homeowner wants to maximize their net proceeds to fund their next acquisition, right?
Sure, they want the highest price possible.
A lender's objective is entirely defensive. They are optimizing for debt recovery while aggressively minimizing their own legal liability.
Now wait, I want to push back on something here, because this directly contradicts a very pervasive market myth.
The secret fire sale myth.
Exactly. If you talk to retail investors, the prevailing narrative is that a bank wants to liquidate a foreclosed asset as rapidly as possible to clear their books.
That they just want it gone.
Right. The assumption is that if a bank takes back a property valued at $1.2 million, they will quietly offload it for $850,000 just to stop the carrying costs and move on.
Right.
But if their primary objective is actually defensive liability management, then the idea of the bank just quietly dumping a house for pennies on the dollar is basically a myth.
Right. It is a complete fiction in the modern regulatory environment. This raises an important question. What exactly is the lender defending against?
Okay, what are they terrified of?
Under the legal frameworks governing mortgages, and the source material highlights this specifically, the lender has a strict fiduciary-like duty to the defaulted homeowner.
Wait, to the person who stopped paying them.
Yes. The lender is legally obligated to obtain fair market value for the asset.
So the bank isn't just worried about recovering their own principal. They are legally accountable to the person they are foreclosing on.
Exactly. Let's say the lender's outstanding debt is $800,000 and the property is worth $1.2 million. They cannot simply sell it for $850,000 to a buddy to clear their books quickly.
What happens if they do?
If they do, the defaulted homeowner will initiate litigation against the lender for what's called an improvidence sale.
An improvidence sale. Okay.
They will argue that the lender acted recklessly, failed to test the open market, and effectively stole hundreds of thousands of dollars of the homeowner's retained equity.
Oh, wow. So the liability rests on the delta between the sale price and the true market value.
Precisely. So the bank is forced to become a highly bureaucratic, heavily documented seller to protect themselves from the very person they are foreclosing on.
They have to build a bulletproof evidentiary trail.
Exactly. This means they cannot do off-market pocket listings. They must commission multiple independent appraisals.
You had to put it on the MLS.
They must expose the asset to the broader market for a statistically significant period of time.
Just to prove that whatever price they ultimately accept is, in fact, the absolute ceiling of the current market.
They are mathematically proving they did not commit an improvident sale.
And while the bank is building this massive paper trail, there is a legal mechanism that runs parallel to the entire process. And honestly, this is perhaps the most destabilizing element of a power of sale for you as a buyer.
The ghost homeowner.
Yes. The original homeowner, despite being in default, retains a specific legal lever right up until the final moments of the transaction, the right of redemption.
This is a wild concept. The right of redemption is the structural equivalent of a ghost haunting the transaction.
Let's walk through the exact mechanics of this because it challenges the fundamental concept of contract certainty.
It really does.
Okay, so picture this. You underwrite the asset, you submit an offer, the bank's recovery committee approves your offer.
You sign the binding agreements.
Right. You waive your contingencies and you wire your non-refundable deposit into escrow. You are legally bound to close on this property on a specific date.
You've secured your financing, arranged your insurance, prepped your contractors.
You have expended significant capital.
Mm.
And then, 48 hours before closing, the original homeowner manages to secure secondary financing from some private lender.
Or maybe they borrow it from a wealthy relative.
Right. They walk into the bank and tender the exact amount of the outstanding mortgage, plus the accumulated arrears and the bank's legal costs. What happens to your binding contract?
It is instantly extinguished.
Just like that.
Just like that. The homeowner has redeemed their mortgage. The bank's legal right to sell the property evaporates the moment the debt is satisfied.
Because they only had the right to sell it to recover the debt.
Exactly. Therefore, their contract with you becomes null and void. The bank accepts the homeowner's funds, the foreclosure proceedings are halted, your deposit is returned to you, and your acquisition simply ceases to exist.
You don't get the house.
You do not get the house.
And what about all the money I spent? I have zero recourse against the bank or the homeowner for the thousands of dollars I spent on appraisals, legal fees, and inspections.
Zero recourse. You absorbed the frictional costs of a transaction that was unilaterally canceled by a third party who wasn't even a signatory to your contract.
That is just. It's a profound disruption of normal real estate law.
It is. Now, the statistical probability of a last-minute redemption is relatively low.
Because if they had the money, they would have paid earlier.
Right. If the homeowner had access to capital, they likely would have deployed it before the property hit the open market. But the severity of the outcome means you have to price that risk into your operational timeline.
You cannot assume absolute certainty of title until the transfer is registered and the keys are in your physical possession.
Never.
Okay, so we've established the operational profile of the seller. They are an institutional entity, totally blind to the physical realities of the asset, obsessed with proving fair market value to avoid this improvident sale lawsuit, and operating under the constant looming threat of a mortgage redemption.
A very unique seller profile.
Extremely. And this defensive posture translates directly into how they structure the conveyance of the physical property. Because they have zero knowledge, they legally mandate that they are conveying zero warranties.
This is the legal foundation of the as-is, where-is framework.
Right. The true risk is the condition.
The lender will not guarantee the structural integrity, the environmental safety, the legality of the zoning, or the operability of any mechanical systems.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you as a buyer. Because as-is, in a distressed context, goes far beyond the cosmetic degradation you might see in, say, a typical estate sale where the house is just dated.
Way beyond.
When a borrower is in the terminal stages of foreclosure, their relationship with the physical asset often turns hostile. The degradation isn't just neglect, it's active extraction.
Yes, the source material provides a real laundry list of potential nightmares here. We have to categorize these risks to effectively underwrite them. The first category is physical extraction, missing fixtures and chattels.
Because when a homeowner knows they are losing the equity, they will often attempt to monetize the physical components of the structure.
We aren't just talking about them unhooking the high-end kitchen appliances and tossing them in a U-Haul.
No, we are talking about systematic stripping.
Removing the custom millwork, Unbolting the HVAC units.
Pulling the copper plumbing lines right out of the drywall.
Stripping the electrical panels. You are underwriting a property that may have been intentionally sabotaged.
It's like buying a mystery box where the previous owner was angry at the box.
Exactly. And that leads directly to the second category of risk, the administrative and legal liabilities that you inherit upon taking title.
Which honestly can be far more expensive than the physical damage.
Consider the risk of open permits or unauthorized structural modifications.
Let's trace the causality of that. Say the previous owner, trying to increase the value of the property or generate rental income to save themselves, decides to finish the basement and add a secondary suite.
A very common scenario.
But because they are financially distressed, they don't hire licensed contractors, and they certainly don't pull permits from the municipality because permits trigger property tax reassessments.
Right, they do the electrical and plumbing work themselves on the weekends.
The bank forecloses, they don't know about the sketchy work, and they sell the property to you as is.
The moment the title transfers to your name, the municipality's enforcement mechanisms are now directed at you.
So if the city finds out,
If an inspector flags that secondary suite, the city doesn't care that you didn't perform the unauthorized work. You are the current title holder. You will be served with an order to comply.
which means you are legally obligated to rip out the drywall, expose the unpermitted electrical work, hire a licensed electrician to bring it up to current code, and pay the retroactive permit fees.
You have just inherited a massive capital expenditure that was completely invisible during a standard visual walkthrough.
Wow. Okay, what's the third category of risk?
The third category is operational risk, specifically regarding tenancy. A property sold under power of sale is often not vacant.
Tenant problems.
Yes. You may be inheriting occupants who have a deeply adversarial relationship with the property and the concept of ownership.
This is a critical distinction. If you buy a standard resale with a tenant, the seller usually provides tenant acknowledgments, right? Copies of the lease, a ledger proving the tenant is actually current on rent.
Standard disclosures.
But the bank doesn't have any of that.
No, they don't know who is living in the basement. They don't know if there is a valid lease, or if it's a relative of the previous owner, or if they've been paying rent to the defaulted owner in cash for the last 6 months.
And the lender's schedule will explicitly state that they do not guarantee vacant possession on closing.
Right. So if you intend to occupy the property yourself, or if your financing is contingent on the property being vacant, you are assuming the entirety of the eviction risk,
You have to navigate the local landlord and tenant tribunals.
which can involve months of delays.
And during that entire time, you are carrying the mortgage, the property taxes, and the insurance, while receiving zero revenue from a hostile occupant who may be actively damaging the asset.
It's a heavy burden to take on. So how do you mathematically process this? How do you underwrite a transaction where you are assuming the risk of structural sabotage, unpermitted administrative liabilities, and hostile tenancies? I mean, you can't just throw your hands up and guess.
No, you have to apply a rigorous approach to the valuation. The text talks about pricing the risk. Right, you actively purchase the risk.
In practical terms, this means you isolate every potential risk vector, assign a worst-case capital cost to rectifying it, and deduct that aggregate sum from the stabilized market value of the property.
Let's run the math on that for a second. Say you identify a distressed property. If it were fully renovated, legally compliant, and vacant, the comparable sales indicate a stabilized market value of $1 million.
Okay, $1 million.
But you recognize it's a power of sale. You walk through and see evidence of a finished basement, but there's no permit history. You assign a $60,000 risk premium for ripping out and legalizing the basement.
Prudent.
You notice the HVAC is missing. It's a hard cost of $15,000. You see signs of an occupant in the secondary suite. You model a 6-month eviction timeline and assign a $25,000 carrying cost penalty.
So your total risk deduction is $100,000.
Exactly. So your absolute ceiling for the acquisition is $900,000.
And you are not discounting the property because the seller is a bank.
No.
You are systematically pricing the capital required to neutralize the liabilities you're forced to inherit.
If you acquire it for $900,000 and the basement work turns out to actually be legally compliant, you capture that $60,000 as immediate equity.
But if the city orders you to tear it out, you have already capitalized the expense into your acquisition basis. You remain solvent either way.
This entire methodology, pricing the risk, is entirely dependent on understanding the legal mechanism the bank uses to force you to accept these liabilities.
Yes, how do they legally enforce this mystery box?
They don't just rely on the fact that it's a distressed sale. They enforce the as-is framework through a very specific legal instrument,
The power of sale schedule.
the ultimate trump card.
This document is the absolute epicenter of the transaction. If you fail to understand the hierarchy of the contract documents, you will inevitably expose yourself to catastrophic legal risk.
Let's break down how real estate contracts are typically constructed. Usually you use a standardized agreement of purchase and sale provided by your local real estate board, right?
Yes, the standard forms.
And these forms have been litigated for decades. They are balanced. They contain inherent protections for the buyer warranties regarding the legality of the property's use, guarantees that the chattels will be in working order on closing.
Mechanisms for addressing damage that occurs between the agreement date and the closing date.
Right. The standard form is designed to facilitate a predictable transfer of a known asset between two reasonable parties.
But when you submit that standard form to an institutional lender in a power of sale,
The bank's legal department takes your form, and they attach their own custom-drafted addendum, the schedule.
and the schedule acts as an absolute legal eraser.
It is a systematic nullification of every protective clause in the standard agreement.
The schedule will explicitly state that the seller makes no representations regarding zoning, environmental conditions, the state of the structure, or the existence of chattels.
But the most lethal component of the schedule is the supremacy clause.
Yes, the supremacy clause. This is the trap that catches so many inexperienced buyers and their agents.
Walk us through it.
The schedule will contain a single sentence that dictates the hierarchy of the contract. It will state something to the effect of, in the event of any conflict or inconsistency between the provisions of this schedule and any other provision of the agreement of purchase and sale, the provisions of this schedule shall supersede and prevail.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see how an agent operating on autopilot can completely compromise their client's position.
Oh, it happens all the time.
Imagine a buyer's agent who realizes the property has a damaged roof. They draft the standard offer, and in the custom conditions section, they write a very specific clause. The seller agrees, at their sole expense, to repair the roof prior to the closing date.
A standard protective clause.
Right. The agent submits the offer, the bank signs the overall agreement, and the agent calls the buyer to celebrate, thinking they have successfully negotiated the repair.
But the agent failed to realize that by signing the bank schedule, they agreed to the supremacy clause.
So an agent could confidently tell their client, "Don't worry, I added a clause to protect us," completely unaware that page 4 of the lender's schedule just legally erased that protection.
That is exactly what happens.
That is terrifying.
The custom clause demanding the roof repair is in direct conflict with the schedules clause, stating the property is sold as is, and the seller will make no repairs.
And because this schedule legally supersedes the standard agreement.
The roof repair clause is instantly voided. The buyer is now legally bound to close on a property with a destroyed roof, and the bank has zero obligation to fix it.
The buyer thought they had a contractual guarantee, but the legal architecture of the schedule quietly disarmed them.
This is why you cannot treat a power of sale like a standard negotiation. You are not negotiating the physical asset, you are negotiating the legal parameters of the schedule.
And to make matters infinitely more complex, these schedules are not standardized across the board.
No, there is no universally accepted power of sale addendum in Ontario or elsewhere.
Every single lending institution utilizes their own proprietary schedule, drafted by their own internal counsel or retained law firms.
A schedule drafted by a major national bank will have entirely different risk allocation mechanisms than a schedule drafted by a private Tier 3 mortgage lender.
A major bank might have a clause that allows them to unilaterally extend the closing date by 30 days without penalty, giving them time to clear up complex title issues.
While a private lender's schedule might give the buyer zero flexibility and allow the lender to retain the entire deposit if the buyer's financing is delayed by a single hour on closing day.
You cannot rely on past experience. You cannot say, "Well, I bought a power of sale last year. I know how this works." Every single one is a unique legal minefield.
Which leads to the non-negotiable operational rule for you as a buyer. The schedule must be subjected to independent legal review before you commit any capital.
Before you go firm.
Exactly. In a traditional real estate transaction, the buyer's lawyer is often essentially an administrative processor. They receive the firm agreement, they conduct the title search, and they facilitate the transfer of
They
funds.
handle the plumbing of the deal after the architecture is already built.
Exactly. But in a distressed acquisition, your lawyer must act as your chief risk officer before the contract is finalized.
You have to get the schedule early.
You must procure a copy of the lender's proprietary schedule, transmit it to your real estate counsel, and have them map out exactly which standard protections have been eradicated.
You need to understand the precise legal consequences of the right of redemption clauses, the eviction parameters, and the title insurance requirements before you waive your due diligence conditions. So what does this all mean for the actual execution of the deal? If the seller is a liability-obsessed institution, the asset is a physical and administrative mystery box, and the contract is a customized legal minefield engineered to strip you of your rights. How do you actually maneuver through this safely?
You deploy a framework of defensive real estate. The entire posture of the buyer and their agent must shift from a sales orientation to a risk management orientation.
The distinction there is crucial. A sales orientation is about visualizing upside. If we knock down this wall, the open concept will add $100,000 in equity.
Right.
A risk management orientation is about isolating and quantifying downside. The schedule states the bank won't guarantee the structural integrity of that load-bearing wall, and there are no permits on file for the previous renovations. We need a structural engineer on site tomorrow.
Defensive real estate requires absolute clarity in communication, especially regarding the limitations of the negotiation.
Plain language is key here.
If you are representing a buyer, you must recalibrate their expectations regarding the seller's responsiveness. You have to explicitly inform them that the lender will not cure defects.
If the basement smells like mold, the bank will not investigate it.
If the furnace is dead, the bank will not replace it.
You cannot submit a list of deficiencies after your home inspection and ask for a $10,000 price reduction to cover the repairs.
No, the bank's response to an inspection-based renegotiation is often simply to cancel the contract and move to the next buyer in line.
Because the as-is clause means the price you offer is the price you pay, regardless of what you discover.
And because the seller will not provide disclosures and the contract will not provide warranties, the entire burden of discovery shifts to the buyer during the due diligence window.
This transforms the condition period into a highly compressed, high-stakes investigative sprint. If the seller won't answer any questions, how do you even verify something as simple as whether the furnace works? You basically have to act like a private investigator.
You absolutely do. You have to view due diligence not as a formality, but as the active discovery of the property's true cost.
In a normal transaction, you might have 5 business days to satisfy a home inspection condition. You hire a generalist home inspector who walks around with a clipboard and tells you the roof is old and the gutters need cleaning.
In a distressed acquisition, a generalist inspector is vastly insufficient. You are underwriting extreme structural and administrative risk.
You need highly specialized, granular data. If there is evidence of unauthorized electrical work, you need a licensed master electrician to scope the panels.
If the property relies on an older septic system and the bank has no pumping records, you need an environmental contractor to scoop the tank and the weeping bed.
And you have to orchestrate all of these specialized trades to access the property, conduct their analysis, and provide you with hard capital cost estimates within that same 120-hour window.
It's a squeeze. You have to have these contractors pre-vetted and on speed dial before you even submit the offer.
Simultaneously, you are running a parallel sprint to secure your capital stack and mitigate your insurance risk, because the physical condition of a distressed asset creates massive friction with traditional underwriters.
Let's explore the interplay between the physical asset, the insurance underwriter, and the mortgage lender. It is a cascading sequence of dependencies.
Oh, this is fascinating. Walk us through it.
Say you find a property. The copper plumbing has been partially stripped, and it's currently relying on an outdated knob and tube electrical system.
Okay.
You price that risk, and you offer $800,000. You take that firm contract to your insurance broker.
Right.
The insurance underwriter looks at the knob and tube electrical and the compromised plumbing, and they classify the property as a severe fire and flood hazard.
Plus, because it's a power of sale, the property may have been vacant for more than 30 days, which triggers a separate set of vacancy exclusions.
Exactly. So the insurance underwriter refuses to bind a standard homeowner's policy. They demand a high-risk, specialized policy with exorbitant premiums, or they deny coverage entirely until the systems are modernized.
But wait, you can't modernize the systems until you own the house.
And here's where the dominoes fall. You take your $800,000 contract to your mortgage lender.
Yeah.
The lender requires proof of active property insurance to fund the loan because they need to know their collateral is protected from fire.
So if you can't secure the insurance policy because of the physical condition,
The mortgage lender will refuse to advance the funds.
your financing collapses.
Yeah.
Not because you don't qualify financially, but because the physical reality of the distressed asset makes it uninsurable under standard terms.
You have to navigate this entire matrix, identifying the physical defects, securing quotes from high-risk insurance markets, and ensuring your lender is willing to underwrite the asset in its current condition before you waive your financing condition.
It requires an incredible amount of proactive coordination.
Oh.
You are essentially acting as a project manager, a legal analyst, and a financial structurer simultaneously.
It's a full-time job for that 5-day window.
Okay, let's assume you've executed this defensive playbook flawlessly. You've quantified the structural liabilities, you've had your legal counsel audit the bank's proprietary schedule, you've secured your high-risk insurance binder and cleared your financing,
You know your exact risk-adjusted maximum purchase price.
and now you actually have to engage the seller and negotiate the acquisition. How do you negotiate with a faceless institution?
The negotiation strategy required for an institutional seller is the exact inverse of the strategy you deploy against a traditional homeowner. If you fundamentally misunderstand the psychology of the entity across the table, you will fail to secure the asset.
Let's dissect this, because real estate agents are heavily trained in emotional negotiation.
Very true.
If you are dealing with a standard homeowner, you're dealing with human psychology. A homeowner has pride. They have an emotional attachment to the ceramic tile they picked out 10 years ago.
They have external pressures. Maybe they've already purchased their next home and they are terrified of carrying 2 mortgages.
Right. So human sellers are vulnerable to psychological pressure. They can be intimidated by aggressive tactics, or they can be charmed by personal appeals.
Hence the standard tactic in a hot market, the bully offer.
Exactly. A property hits the market on Monday. The homeowner schedules an offer presentation for next Tuesday. You swoop in on Tuesday morning with an aggressive, clean offer, priced slightly below market value, but you attach a ruthless 2-hour irrevocable deadline.
You tell the homeowner, take this guaranteed money right now or I walk away forever.
The homeowner panics, the emotional pressure spikes, and they accept the offer out of fear of losing the deal.
But if you attempt to execute a bully offer against a bank's recovery department, you're wasting your time.
Why?
Because a lending institution does not experience fear. They do not experience panic. They are not carrying 2 mortgages.
Right.
The entity analyzing your offer is an asset manager or a committee of asset managers operating inside a strict bureaucratic framework.
They are just looking at a spreadsheet.
Exactly. You cannot intimidate an algorithm.
The asset manager is evaluating your offer against a strict set of internal mandates. And remember the primary mandate we discussed earlier, the defense against the improvident sale lawsuit.
Right. The bank has a legal obligation to prove to the defaulted homeowner that they thoroughly tested the open market.
Therefore, if a power of sale property hits the MLS on Monday and you submit a bully offer on Tuesday,
The asset manager will automatically reject it regardless of the price. Because if they accept an offer on day 2, the defaulted homeowner's legal counsel will immediately argue that the bank failed to expose the property to the market for a sufficient duration, depriving other potential buyers of the opportunity to bid up the price.
the bank must let the property accumulate days on market to build their evidentiary defense. It's like playing poker against a casino rather than playing against a tourist.
That's a great analogy.
A tourist gets sweaty,
Uh-huh.
You bluff a tourist, you can raise the stakes and watch them fold under the psychological weight of the bet.
But the casino doesn't sweat.
No. The casino has a mathematical advantage, and they execute their strategy purely based on statistical probability. You can't bluff the casino's risk management department.
Yeah.
You simply have to understand their algorithm and wait for the math to tilt in your favor.
And in the context of institutional real estate, the primary variable in that algorithm is time. Time beats aggression. The asset manager has a mandated matrix. For the first 30 days on market, they may be authorized to accept offers no lower than 98% of the appraised value. They need to establish that the initial pricing was tested.
But if the property sits, if it hits day 45, day 60, day 90, with no acceptable offers.
The market has definitively spoken. The lack of buyer engagement acts as empirical proof that the initial appraisal was flawed or that the physical condition of the property warrants a deeper discount.
Once the asset accumulates significant days on market, the asset manager's algorithmic constraints begin to loosen.
Because the liability of an improvident sale diminishes. The bank can point to 90 days of open market exposure as proof they tried to get the initial asking price.
And now the asset manager is authorized to accept 90%, then 85% of the original list price.
Time on the market is literally the only leverage you possess. If you want the property at a steep discount, you have to have the discipline to wait for the bank's internal timeline to unlock that discount.
But we must clarify a fundamental misconception regarding the nature of that discount. The market assumes that a power of sale implies an automatic, systemic discount simply because the seller is a bank.
The myth of the power of sale discount, the cartoon dollar signs. The assumption that the bank is legally required to give you a deal.
That is mathematically false. The market is highly efficient. If a power of sale property is listed publicly on the MLS and is located in a desirable neighborhood and the physical structure is sound.
Every investor and their algorithms are looking at the exact same data you are.
If the asset is clean, the fact that the legal seller is a bank becomes irrelevant to the pricing model.
Multiple buyers will recognize the value, they will submit competing offers, and the open market competition will drive the final sale price right up to or even above the standard retail value of the property.
The crucial insight here is understanding what the discount actually represents. You do not get a discount because the legal status of the transaction is a power of sale.
No, you get a discount because the condition of the asset is degraded and because you are assuming the legal liabilities contained within the schedule.
The discount is the market's mechanism for compensating you for the risk you are absorbing. If you buy a property for $200,000 below comparable retail value, it's because the market has collectively decided that navigating the right of redemption, legalizing the unpermitted basement, replacing the stripped HVAC, and accepting a contract with zero warranties will cost approximately $200,000 in capital and frictional effort.
You are being paid to solve the problems that the bank refuses to solve and that traditional buyers are terrified to touch. That is the essence of distressed investing. You are exchanging capital certainty for operational and legal liability.
This entire framework completely shifts the paradigm of real estate acquisition. You are no longer buying a home. You are executing a highly structured, risk-adjusted corporate acquisition.
You have to divorce the physical structure from the legal transaction. You might love the architectural lines of the house, but you must respect the supremacy of the schedule.
It requires profound analytical discipline. You have to be willing to walk away if the math of the risk assessment doesn't align with the algorithm of the lender.
Absolutely.
So let's distill this deep dive into a precise operational framework for navigating this landscape. First, you must neutralize the psychological extremes. You cannot underwrite a distressed asset with the assumptions of a standard resale, nor should you be paralyzed by the terminology. The opportunity exists precisely in the analytical middle ground.
Second, you must accurately profile your counterparty. You are negotiating against a liability-obsessed bureaucracy driven by the legal requirement to avoid an improvident sale, completely disconnected from the physical reality of the asset.
Third, you must acknowledge the absolute supremacy of the lender's schedule. It is a legal instrument designed to eradicate your standard contractual protections. Independent legal review prior to waiving contingencies is not optional. It is mandatory.
Fourth, your due diligence must shift from passive inspection to aggressive, specialized risk quantification. You are pricing the liabilities of the unknown.
And finally, you must deploy time as your primary negotiating leverage, recognizing that institutional algorithms only respond to accumulated market data, not aggressive tactics.
It is a masterclass in risk management.
But before we conclude, I want to return to the most destabilizing concept we've explored today.
The ghost.
Yes, the right of redemption, the ghost homeowner hovering over the transaction.
It is the ultimate test of an investor's tolerance for uncertainty.
Think about the sheer psychological weight of that specific legal mechanism. Imagine you execute every phase of this playbook with absolute precision. You identify the asset. You deploy your specialized contractors to map the structural deficiencies. You run the stochastic models and price the risk perfectly.
Your legal counsel audits the bank's proprietary schedule and structures your offer to navigate the traps.
You exhibit incredible discipline, waiting out the bank's internal 60-day algorithm to secure a price that compensates you for the liability. You secure high-risk insurance, you lock in your capital stack, and the bank executes the binding contract.
You have mastered the mechanics of the distress transaction.
You are 24 hours away from taking possession. The moving trucks are reserved. And in that final moment, the original defaulted homeowner exercises their legal right, satisfies the outstanding debt, and redeems the mortgage.
The bank's legal authority to sell the asset is extinguished.
Your airtight contract is voided, the asset is gone.
It forces a profound realization about the nature of property rights in a distressed context.
It really does. It leaves you with this lingering, almost philosophical realization about the market. If you are navigating the complex, highly engineered machinery of a power of sale, are you ever actually buying a physical piece of real estate?
Or are you just buying the probability of one?
Exactly. Are you simply purchasing the statistical probability of a house, forced to accept that the asset isn't truly yours until the final legal transfer is registered, the ghost is banished, and the physical keys are finally resting in your hand?
A critical distinction for any investor to ponder.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope we've fundamentally altered how you view the mechanics, the risks, and the hidden structures of the distressed real estate market. Keep questioning the standard forms, demand clarity on the underlying legal mechanics of your investments, and we will see you on the next